for the Supply Chain Global Summit. We are recording this webinar, and it will be available for replay. So if people within your organization don't have the opportunity to join us now, we'll be glad to share the link, and we'll also be sharing the insights of this webinar on Twitter and also on LinkedIn, so that as we go along, you can follow the chat stream at SCI Webinar. So the Supply Chain Insights Global Summit's in its second year, and 110 supply chain leaders will be gathering in the desert at the Phoenician in Scottsdale, Arizona, to talk about how to imagine the supply chain differently. You know, the supply chain that we have today is stuck. 9 out of 10 companies are not able to make progress at the intersection of operating margin and inventory turns. Complexity has increased. We are now nearing the end of the second generation of supply chain technologies. And the question is, what's next? What lies ahead of us? So today we have a number of great speakers, and what we're going to do is have a panel discussion on how these particular panelists view the results and get their insights about the evolution of supply chain. So Allison, let me start with you. Can you tell the group a little bit about your background and your thoughts as you go into the summit?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Laura. I am the Director of Strategy and Business Development, but just recently I have picked up responsibility for our skills mission for the supply chain at IBM. And so I'm very excited to come to the summit and talk a little bit not only about some of the new technologies and new areas and trails we're blazing in the supply chain, but also how we enable our teams to make that transition. So thanks for having me today.
Yeah, I love the work IBM's been doing on skilling a new generation of workers. Tony, how about yourself? Can you share with the group about who you are and about coming to the summit?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Tony Verbeck. I work in a supply chain center of excellence within Johnson & Johnson. It's a relatively new group. We've been around for about a year or so. I attended the conference last year and will be attending next week as well. And again, I'm looking forward to talking about the fact that many companies are stuck and talking about how to get unstuck in the near term. But one role we play over the long term is always looking out at the new technologies, the new ways of thinking, the new types of data that are going to be available to us, and the new ways of evaluating that data. And so it's a great blend of talking a bit about the current state and moving forward, but also thinking about how we leverage some of the new great stuff coming along in the second generation to potentially leapfrog and move significantly ahead of where we are today.
Thank you very much. John, how about yourself? As you get ready to attend the summit, what's top of mind, and tell the group about what you do.
Thank you, Laura, for having me. So I'm the CEO of Retail Solutions, and we work with CPG companies and retailers to basically assist in the collaboration between them and data sharing. And the things that excite me are the greater opportunity to do what you've always termed as demand sensing, where with retailers sharing data, the CPG companies, the suppliers can actually see moment by moment or day by day the actual demand patterns. And what I think is exciting is the ability to start to shape that, another term that you've created, but to really shape it so that we not only have a supply chain, but we have what I like to call the supply demand chain, where we can really work on both ends and give very appropriate service to these shoppers. So I think that the new technology and the new willingness to share data is very exciting.
I do too. Thank you very much, John. And Tim, how about yourself as you get ready to pack your bag?
So thanks, Laura. This is Tim Weidenhaft, General Mills. I've been with the company 19 years, and I too was at last year's summit and really appreciated that and look forward to coming out next week as well. You know, for me, as I think about it, the environment we're operating in with the level of complexity, and that can be external factors driving that, clearly internal factors as we continue to strive for more growth, and then the regulatory side of the equation is driving a lot of pressure on our planning organizations. And the tools that we frankly have from 20 years ago aren't meeting the needs moving forward. And so as we talk about getting stuck in that operating margin and inventory turn trade-offs that we make every day, these emerging technologies, I think, are going to be critical.
I do too. So as we go along, we're going to be tweeting at #ImagineSE, which will be the hashtag for the event. So let's get into the research. As we get ready for the summit, what we asked are for attendees to fill out the survey. And at the time that we did the survey, we had 54 respondents, so about a half of the group. And on average, the average company coming is $4 billion on average, and 78% senior director or above, which we like because these are the people that are really thinking hard about supply chain. And when we ask people to describe the metaphors that really are underpinning their supply chain, this is the profile. You know, they see the supply chain as very controlled. They see it as global. But, you know, down at the bottom, they don't see it as very proactive. They don't see it as working well. This particular group has a big gap in terms of the supply chain working well. And so when we look at, you know, the people that are coming, you know, 48% of companies are trying to have a supply chain center of excellence. But the question is, what is excellence? And so, Tony, I'm going to pick on you now because I know you're really involved in building the supply chain center of excellence. Tell me a little bit about that journey and where you're at in defining excellence, and if the metaphor description surprises you at all.
Oh, no, not at all. We, as I mentioned earlier, are only about a year into our existence, and over that year, there's been a tremendous amount of learning, course correcting, etc. Our mission is really to add value to the business units of Johnson & Johnson. And really those business units in our decentralized organization have really grown up independently over the last 20 to 30 years. And we have some that have, quite honestly, excelled and many that have not. But as we try to bring them all together, and to your point, discuss what excellence is, the viewpoints are far and wide. So one role that we play, and we very much use the words that you use, Laura, around metrics that matter, is to try to align on what those performance measures are. And that's a very foundational element. But honestly, without the foundation, it's difficult to build on top of it. So we do a certain amount of standardization around one view to what excellence is. But we don't want to do only that standardization. And beyond that, the lesson we've learned is that if we aren't adding value to those business units, small, medium, and large, we have not earned our right to exist. So we do a bit of that standardization, but we also work directly with those business units on on what the barriers are that are keeping them stuck, and bring to them tools from inside our company as well as outside, technologies, processes, people capabilities to get them unstuck and move them forward up the maturity curve. But I will say we are very, very young, and we still continue to learn every day about the balance of our activities, so that overall, as a corporation, we know that we're moving up and truly achieving what we see as the one view of excellence.
Now, Allison, I know that a lot's going on at IBM. You've got a lot of movement of the divisions and spin-offs of products. Would you consider that you have a supply chain center of excellence? And if so, tell us about your journey.
I think our journey at IBM it started for supply chain over a decade ago, and we continue to evolve. So, you know, in the early 2000s, we integrated our supply chain. It was growing up product line by product line. At that point, just over a decade ago, we integrated into one organization. We spent about, the first 8 years getting it globally integrated, so that was a huge journey for us. We were able to demonstrate as a supply chain organization that we could have a real impact to the bottom line by consolidating, excuse me, and driving those processes globally. There was a huge benefit to the corporation, and as a result, we've been able to expand our scope maybe beyond the traditional SCORE model. So we do a lot of pre-sale support now. And our focus currently and going forward is really, okay, we now have a globally integrated organization. We've got an expanded scope. As a result, we have a lot of extended data touch points. How do we now harness that data and really make supply chain smarter and a source of analytics power for the company? So, deploying analytics, all the way from pre-sales, helping with pricing analytics, all the way out into the channel, which I know you've heard a few stories about. So, from there we go on to cognitive. So I think we're at that point of, moving this into these exciting future technologies, taking advantage of cloud and analytics systems of engagement.
Yeah, I agree. Now, Tim, when I think about General Mills, I think about planning excellence, I think about excellence in design. Would you consider your group as a supply chain center of excellence or just doing a great job at planning? What's your perspective?
Hopefully both, but we really started our Center of Excellence journey about 5 years ago, and that's been evolving, I think, over that time period as we've continued to understand what it really means. I love Tony's comments about driving business value, and so as those business needs change, our Center of Excellence has had to change and adapt with those changing requirements. And so, I think some of the benefits we've seen through that is similar to what Allison was referring to, the ability to bring in higher level talent and to gain that depth of understanding as we deal with things like higher level analytics, dealing with big data. How do you connect that data? That's one of the big challenges we have. And so, I think that has really enabled us to not only focus on what supply chain always does, which is, really controlling the cost side, but also to help our sales organization from a growth perspective.
Well, and John, let me just open this up to you. The evolution of channel data and analytics for channel data, the buyer started out being marketing and sales, but are you selling now to the Supply Chain Center of Excellence? And how are you finding the enterprise application efforts to use demand data evolving?
I think that at this point, ironically enough, supply chain is the #1 driver for view into the channels. And most of our corporate customers are, in fact, a center of excellence or a visionary head of supply chain. And J&J certainly fits in that category. PepsiCo with John Phillips does, and they see the ability to look at demand as it's occurring and really cut out the days of lag until they understand what's happening. And as soon as you put lag into knowing your actual customer's demand, you create inventory, you create uncertainty. So what they're really doing is extending the idea of ERP, which was originally to say all of our plans should be linked tightly so that we know exactly what they're doing. They're linking it now to the shopper's actual activities. And so supply chain has really become the driver. And the companies, P&G is certainly one of them, have been the leaders in then looking across all their retailers and having an integrated view of it. So we find supply chain really taking the lead in this path. And I know you work with most of these companies helping them there.
Well, John, and as you have the conversations, because we travel a lot of the similar paths, I still find that people are struggling to understand the concepts around demand latency or the need for channel data. The number one question I get is, what's the return on investment? And, you know, as we talk about the lag of the demand for the order, you know, it's good for me to hear that the supply chain leaders are asking you to come in and talk about that. How do you find the understanding of demand latency and demand sensing maturing in the market?
Well, you know, what we find is that the traditional supply chain really so focused on forecasting the order that they didn't see the opportunity to basically look at not wait for the actual view into demand and just wait for the order. So what we're finding is, in the past, not enough retailers shared data to make it possible. And, you know, you've been doing this for a long time. We all know that until you get to 50 or 60% of your demand, your retail or your channel demand being visible, it's very hard to do it. You end up still depending on looking and forecasting orders. But now, as more and more retailers, and for example, in the CPG categories, all of the big guys, Walmart, Target, Kroger, Safeway, all share data. So if you're in that area, or if you're in consumer products goods, CVS, Walgreens, all of the major channels for drug manufacturers share data. So it really is possible today, and the vision you put out is finally there. And I think that the leaders are seeing it, and they see a tremendous competitive advantage to basically have very high levels of customer service while actually cutting the inventory levels, both at their facilities, but also at the retailers. So we do see that happening now that enough retailers are sharing data.
Isn't that great to see? Now, I just changed slides, Tony and Allison and Tim. You know, one of the things that we find very interesting in our research efforts is, while companies have formed these centers of excellence to look at, maybe it's talent development, or maybe it's analytics, or maybe it's demand sensing, that they're struggling with the definition of excellence. And so in our study, only 30% of the respondents view their centers as effective. Tim, does this surprise you?
You know, I was surprised it was that low, but I think the danger and the thing that you've got to watch out for as you go into centers of excellence is losing your intimacy with your business. And, you know, so as you pull these functions and resources that typically were localized and much more intimate with their business environment that they're in, the key is to keep that focus on driving the value and then adapting your organization to the changing environment around you. And so maybe that's what people are seeing out there as they look at their centers of excellence.
Yeah, you know, this whole thing about, do we push or do we pull, you know, for the center of excellence, and the definition of governance of regional versus global supply chains is something we're going to be talking a lot about. Allison and Tony, any insights here about either the fact that it's only 30% or what people can do to make it more effective?
Yeah, I mean, I touched on this a little bit before, and I definitely agree with what Tim said. We fight a constant battle to not become white, you know, ivory tower professors of truisms, but yet we do need standards and we do need a common language. And then, but we're always trying to balance that with, again, back to the value that we're adding. And we know in our early going, one of the first pieces of feedback we got was that, you know, we like the content that you've created for us. It's great, but it's not making a difference. And so we changed our path a little bit, and we're now working with some very small parts of Johnson & Johnson, but we would rather make a true difference in a small part of the company than make no difference across the entire company. So I've seen some of the downsides there, and I can only guess maybe that's where some of the negative responses are coming from. But again, we continue to learn.
Yeah, and Totally, I agree with definitely both of what the guys said here. I think we have worked for a long time to get the organization to work well, and a couple of learnings that we've had. I would say 2 learnings. One is we found it very effective to have this what we call 3-in-a-box approach. And we've organized these small projects, as Tony was just mentioning, with an operational line owner, someone that has responsibility to the particular product line, for instance, along with, our supply chain, process excellence folks. And then, the third leg that we have pulled in recently is analytics. So we try to infuse an analytics element into any process improvement that we're doing. So those 3 act as a team so that we try to avoid this ivory tower where we're changing processes in a vacuum approach. Also, and I think Tony referred to this as well, this sort of start small, think big approach. We're really focused on speed of transformation at this point, and we found that having a small proof point helps with adoption across the globe and across a large scale, versus trying to architect a massive solution and then fighting the adoption battle. So those are the 2 learnings I think we've had on this front to make ourselves more effective.
Well, and Allison, I think one of the things that you do that's kind of unique is you've got funding for analytics to do innovation projects, where as a lot of companies don't. They're still holding themselves to very tight return on investment and not able to do that experimentation with analytics. And we're going to talk more about that in a minute. But, when we look at the business pain of cross-functional alignment, rising demand, supply volatility, the lack of supply chain visibility, the ability to use data. I was actually presenting the other day, and someone in the group said that, our systems are like Hotel California. The data checks into our systems, but we can't use it. Tim, what surprises you or speaks to you about this list?
I actually can resonate with all 4 of those. I think we've talked about making sure we have the alignment already, so I'll put that one aside. But definitely the volatility we're seeing is at levels that I can tell you I haven't seen before, and I don't see it slowing down. The environment we're operating in the marketplace around North America especially is becoming complex. We're going into more channels. We've got omni-channel segmentation coming up. We're trying to drive growth, and so all of these business pains are landing right on our supply chain planning organizations, and the ability to see better end-to-end, the ability to use the data we have. I love your analogy on the data checking in, it doesn't check out, because connecting that information has been probably one of our key challenges, and it's not a very sexy thing to be working on, but it's so critical.
Yeah, now is demand volatility higher than supply, or is supply higher than demand right now? Or is it
funny you say that, because I would say, we've always focused on demand volatility, right? It's always been there. And I think that's up as well, but supply volatility too. Especially as you think about our more focus on quality. Our suppliers are having more volatility. Everyone remembers last year's winter and the disruption that we had from a supply point of view with the weather. So we're seeing much more on the supply side than ever before.
Great. Tony, your thoughts here?
I'm sure, like many people on the phone or on the webinar here, you can identify with every one of these elements. Certainly, the items at the top resonate well with the pieces of my company that are struggling the most. I will say that around cross-functional alignment specifically, we're seeing a shift in still some places of J&J from honestly the make organization where production and cost was king to the broader supply chain end-to-end view, which is much more around balance and balance between cost and working capital and service. And that's really slowly but surely finding its way into the supply chain planning organization, and certainly my group in the Center of Excellence is attempting to build a platform and a home for that. And that's where some of my excitement about network modeling tools, et cetera, come in that can evaluate balance at a much greater level and with much more credibility than we've been able to do in the past. So I certainly resonate as well with those items, and it's a big piece of the journey that we're on.
Allison, in prior studies, the executive team understanding of the supply chain was really at the top. It's fallen a little bit. Any thoughts here? Do you look at this list? Any surprises or thoughts?
I don't think I have any surprises here. We have, I think from our perspective, really been focused on the supply chain visibility and ability to use the data in recent times. Within our supply chain, that executive team understanding of what we do I think we've done a better job in recent years of demonstrating, and I believe Tim said this earlier, not only the fact that we can, reduce costs and return to the organization that way, but we can also enable growth. As we have integrated and gone through that journey and started to use new technologies, we've actually been able to help some of our clients transform their own supply chains. And once you can help the sales team and support their growth in that way, the understanding of what we do tends to increase. So I think that's been very helpful for us in the last couple of years to get at that issue.
So business pain has increased. We've got supply chain centers of excellence, but they're not being very effective. Let's look at, where we're at. So one of the issues is that, people want to drive alignment through S&OP. And right now, most people, 69%, say we're still pretty immature. We're using Excel spreadsheets. We're starting to use cloud. What are your thoughts here? Tony, any thoughts here?
Yeah, it's an area where, in some ways, we're lucky that our divisions and our business units have grown at different levels over time. We have some of our more advanced divisions that are certainly well into the maturing phase. They've gone through the journey. They're having balanced discussions. All the right folks are at the table. Now it's a matter of getting them the data and visualized in a way that's meaningful for everybody, where they can have an even more robust conversation. So that part is occurring in some pieces. And then there's others that are just getting the right people to the table now and actually just beginning the S&OP journey. The piece of this that I think we're most excited about is that visualization element and the ability to analyze scenarios live. Someone proposes a change or a decision, and the ability to understand what the outcome of that decision would be, even in general terms, versus taking a follow-up and coming back a week later with more spreadsheets. That's the piece of this that we find to be the most powerful. But obviously you need those foundational elements first before you're ready to even have those types of discussions. So I think the progress has been slow but steady, and we're certainly encouraged.
Now, John, do you see people asking you for help to get channel data into S&OP? Do you see that trend as you look at this, or do you think we're still pretty immature there?
I think it depends on the scale and the maturity of the CPG company. So what we find is that the usual suspects, so the Unilevers, the Procter & Gamble, the Johnson & Johnson, are very advanced. And they not only have centers of excellence in the sense of they're looking at how to do things, but many of them actually have facilitators who work with each individual team, retailer team, on how to get the best practices employed by that retailer team in their forecasting, because they really see what's happening at the retailer. As we go to the mid-tier, it's much spottier. So when you get to the companies that are under, let's say, 15 billion, it's hit or miss, and we don't see as much of that. We see a few companies really starting to do that. Georgia Pacific, Starbucks really have the interest to do it. But that's the place where we don't see that much of it. And as we go to the smaller companies, it's almost non-existent because they really focus so much on one or two major customers and the other don't have it. So we're really seeing that the people who lead in the supply chain indices that you put out, they're the ones who are doing it, but the others are lagging.
So the leaders are leading. Now, Tim, you know, you and I have talked about tools for a long time. I got to say that this result surprised me. I know that we're immature, but this picture shows much less maturity than I was expecting, you know, and I'm talking to a lot of companies that have 3 to 5 ERP systems. They have multiple instances of planning. Does this data surprise you? Where do you think you are here?
You know, it's interesting that you talk about the maturity level and some of the tools, and you know, MS Office, Excel is clearly on that list, right? And you know, I think it gets to some of the challenges we're seeing around the need to be flexible, the need to have more what-if capabilities, the desire to go more visual. And unfortunately, a lot of our old 20-year-old planning systems just don't have that capability. And so I think what you're seeing is this evolution where people are creating these Band-Aids, if you would, around some fundamental system issues we have. And then I know there are people out there now that are getting more sophisticated around the analytics and visualization side too, as we are as well. And that's going a long way to help these business teams manage the risks and the trade-off decisions that they need to make. And so I do see it's going to continue to be an evolution, but it's one where we do clearly have technologies emerging that will help enable us to do this.
Now, Allison, I know, you know, IBM sits at the pillar of analytics and test and learn, and I was talking to you about S&OP 11 years ago. How about this slide? Does this surprise you, and where do you think you are on this?
You know, before Tim just commented, I would have said mature to sophisticated, but I actually think that he's spot on. So our core S&OP processes, we have had in a tool for several years, right, many years. But I do think that flexibility of systems, it does drive us to use one-off spreadsheets here and there to do an analysis of different options. You know, we may run our analytics that plug into the S&OP offline and integrate them. And one of our major focus areas, especially as it relates to emerging technologies, is how do we either use, how do we get more flexible with that IT? So can we create APIs that interface to that data so that people can engage with the data the way they need to see it without using a spreadsheet, right? So how do we make those systems more flexible, and how do we train our employees to think that way and to build, some of those little tools to help them automate some of that analysis. So again, I think before Tim brought up that point, I was thinking, yeah, we're mature. I'm kind of surprised by this slide, but I do think there are gaps that we fill with spreadsheets that we're trying to work on migrating into more modern technologies.
So we're going to be talking a lot next week about freeing ourselves from the spreadsheet ghetto, right? We have so much work in the spreadsheet ghetto, right? And one of the issues when we talk about alignment is the S&OP process is just not balanced. Most people have more focus on the S or the OP, and only 18% of companies have a focus on the balance. And I think part of the issue is cultural, but I think part of the issue is also technology. So we're going to be talking about this also and why it matters, because we see that companies that are more balanced between the S&OP have about 10% better inventory turns. So John, what trend excites you? So this is what excites the people coming. What excites you about the trends that people are seeing here?
There are really two combinations, and one is we've spoken of just before, which is the trend toward retailers starting to share data and truly collaborate with suppliers. And I think the pressure that the retailers are feeling from Amazon, from personalization, from the empowered shopper, have made them much more open to collaborate with their suppliers and really look at the end-to-end supply chain. So I think that data sharing and collaboration is very exciting. I think the other thing is the technology to basically really see where each shopper is and give them a very personalized experience. So with iBeacon, with mobile, with digital, we can really start to interact shopper by shopper and get to what you've always talked about that's been very hard to do, which is truly shape demand on the shopper level. So I think that combination of retailers being willing to work with the CPG companies and also the technology to really let everybody interact with the shopper if they opt in is very exciting.
I agree. Okay, Tim, what excites you on this list? When you come to the conference, what are you looking to talk about?
I'm assuming the analytics side is in that increased visibility in the big data, so I'll
yep.
But I think I'm really on that page with Allison is the advanced analytic capabilities that are evolving and we're able to use to really make optimization decisions that we never could before, whether that's around looking at the balance sheet as well as the income statement and the trade-offs that we make between those. As we deal with higher volatility and balancing demand and supply, and frankly having more insights into the volatility that's driving them, the inputs into those. And so to me it's around that analytic area.
Tony, what excites you?
Yeah, I hate to jump onto that bandwagon, but it's really the same thing. And I thought I would just share a quick experience that I had recently around data visualization and really and supply chain visibility. I used to talk about it like I knew what it was, but this experience really drove it home. We were doing an analysis for one piece of Johnson & Johnson. We downloaded information, everything you could think about at the product level for one of our divisions. So we're going to say 5,000 products and maybe 30 characteristics about those products. And we gave it to one of our younger folks, maybe 5 or 6 years of experience in the COE, and then gave him a data visualization tool. And about 6 hours later, he came back with an analysis of segmentation, productivity, inventory, in a way that in Excel, PowerPoint, et cetera, I think might have taken a week. And he did it in just a few hours, and he had never used the tool before. So it opened my eyes to what data visualization is, and the fact that for years we've spent millions of dollars on sort of the old way, I would call it now, of analytics, massive databases with clunky visualization layers on top. And so that's why that experience alone got me very excited and a little more knowledgeable about what this is we're talking about, and the fact that we can do better analytics, get more insights faster and cheaper. So that excites me a lot.
Allison, how about yourself?
Well, I'm going to try not to repeat.
Okay.
Definitely the intersection of visibility and big data is a very exciting space right now. So I think we've all three, really said that. We are working on, visibility technology to get, use analytics to drive proactive alerts into that visibility layer. Very exciting stuff. But I think, you know, this influence of, you know, I hate to call it a millennial mindset, but this very sort of experimental, you know, take a new piece of technology, 6 hours later you can have new answers, new visualizations, new insights is really, really exciting. And one of the things that, probably one of our most exciting things that we're working on here is having a sort of a supply chain kind of lab environment where we're allowing people to experiment with this data, particularly where it intersects with mobile. How can we get this onto people's mobile devices? How can they get alerts wherever they are in the world? And how can we turn information into action at a very rapid pace? So changing the culture a little bit to allow for that experimentation has also been very exciting, and I think can only return more as we go forward.
I agree. So let's look at where people are going to spend their money. So we've talked about what excites you, but when we ask people what they're going to buy in the next 18 months, right? John, I see sensing demand underneath forecasting and S&OP and optimizing inventory. You're a little bit under those traditional buys. How do you think we elevate the spend there?
I think it's really a question of proving the return on investment, but I think it's also a question of integrating that data into these powerful new tools. And what we find is that there's a real challenge because each retailer has different formats, they send data at different times, and so the challenge of getting good, clean, harmonized data into these tools is very difficult for a lot of people. So I think that as people get the ability to pour that data in on a daily basis into their tools, it'll make a big difference. That means a fair amount of integration work. So I think as people do that, and most importantly, if people stand up in your conference and begin to explain the value of demand sensing, what they were able to do, how they were able to respond and know something 3 to 4, 5, 6 days sooner. Very simple example, if you're doing a new product introduction, it's critical that manufacturing know very early on what the right mix of product is, whether it's size, color, flavor. And if you have to wait 4, 5, 6, 7 days more to know that versus you know within 2 or 3 days, very valuable. That's the same as you would want all the time. So I think as people really start to show that return on investment by linking the data into these tools, we'll see more interest.
I agree. Now, Tim, if I look at this list, you know, one of the things that we captured in the metaphors is that people are stuck, that we've got inside-out processes, not outside-in processes. My fear is that people are going to really implement these new technologies inside out, not outside in. Does this list, how do you feel about this list, and any insights here?
Yeah, you know, it was interesting. I was looking at this and I was reacting that way to it. So, yeah, we're doing some more advancements on our inventory optimization. Yes, we're doing the S&OP. But I would say we're investing more heavily on the connected data. And I'm talking end-to-end connected data that then is going to drive the end-to-end visibility and outside of our organization. And so how do you bring the customer and consumer data and insights into your company? How do you enhance collaboration? Because inventory movement doesn't always go with the POS, as you know, as you get into merchandising and so on. And so that collaboration is just critical. And then also on the supplier side, with that increased volatility that we're seeing with supply, it can be a real competitive advantage to have a much tighter knit supply chain with the second and third tier suppliers. So this slide of all of them has probably surprised me the most.
Yeah, I'm surprised that more people aren't investing in digital manufacturing. In fact, one of the things that's my goal is to really raise the level of awareness about redefinition of manufacturing. Tony, your thoughts on this slide?
Yeah. On the one hand, we are definitely investing in inventory optimization as one key area. I will note that it is interpreted occasionally as an inside out, but for most of the work we're doing, it's actually the primary purpose is around the service for us to provide to our customers. When we have applied that application to business units with global manufacturing strategies as well as local, we continually find that while we certainly have more inventory than we should in aggregate, we also have it in the wrong places, in the wrong form, and in many cases we find at the item level that we need to go up and other areas down. You know, and really it's just through better mathematics for the same inputs. So I'll just comment on that one, that it's been as much an insight on the service side as it has been on the working capital side for us.
Allison, any thoughts here from your side?
Yeah, I think the one thing here that would be interesting is, you know, there's the visibility technology that I think, you know, on the charts, the trends that everybody rates very highly are visualization, visibility, big data, but then you look at the purchases and they don't match to that, right?
Right.
And, you know, also there's been lots of discussion on collaboration, right, up and down the chain. And I would expect that with the visibility technologies, with some of the newer technologies, there's opportunity to increase collaboration as well. And you're right, a lot of these are very internally focused optimization plays, which are always, you know, good investments, right, good to do. But maybe the other technologies just have not yet hit the scene. So I think there's an interesting dynamic there between where we say our trends are and where we're actually investing.
I agree, and I think it's heating up. One of the things we're going to do at the conference is we're going to have a small breakout session for people that have SAP backbones to talk about HANA and the evolution of HANA and what they're going to do on, you know, continue to invest in APO or not, because we're going on a forced rewrite to HANA, or adopt best of breed. So I look forward to the output of that separate breakout. I think that's going to be a fascinating discussion, and of course it won't have any technologists, it'll just be users. So, you know, in summary, I hope that everyone can come. We're going to have a discussion about how to do supply chains differently. We're going to launch a program about the top 15 supply chains to admire, which is a data-driven process that looks at performance and improvement together to look across the peer groups and to really say which companies have done it best. We're going to tease out digital manufacturing, the collaborative economy, new forms of visualization. And if you can't make it, we encourage you to join us on Ustream, follow us on social, and we will be posting the presentations, and we would love to hear from you as we go along. And if you can't make 2014, we'll see you in 2015. So, Tim, any last-minute thoughts as we get ready to go to the desert and have this discussion?
Well, with winter around the corner, I'm looking forward to getting down to Phoenix, so enjoying the collaboration. You know, I will say from last year, the piece that I really enjoyed was the peer connections. And I know you and your team do an excellent job of creating those opportunities, and so I look forward to talking with the other panelists and others of the 110 that'll be down there.
John, any last-minute thoughts as we pack our bags?
No, I agree. I think the peer connection is fantastic. And I hope over time that there are more retailers who come to this, because I think they're a critical linkage in terms of the end-to-end visibility and collaboration.
I agree. And maybe you can help me with that. Tony, any last-minute thoughts?
Oh, no, I think we all know it's, you know, we spend our days and sometimes get wrapped up in our, you know, internal struggles. And this call has reminded me how great it is to hear from other industries, other experts. And so I'm more excited at the end of this call than I was before, and just looking forward to connecting with everyone next week in Arizona.
We are as well. Allison, any thoughts?
Yeah, obviously Tony, Tim, John, and I have a lot in common. We have a lot of the same responses, so plenty to talk about. I look forward to the conference. This will be my first one, so I'm excited. And the only thing that keeps going through my head is I hope that over time we can get this fast, agile, modern, and proactive moving up your list of supply chain descriptors, and also strategic. So I like that chart a lot.
Awesome. We'll see you there. It'll be September 10th and 11th. Imagine supply chains as you've never imagined them before. Help your company to unstick the supply chain. Think differently. This is Laura Cefiri. We'll join you again from the summit as we imagine the supply chain in the future. Many thanks to the panel. Have a great day.